There you
Hey,
are.
I made it.
Man, it's so good to see you. I like you got two great panelists. I set this up perfectly for you because I love listening to your video recordings and I learn a lot from it. And this is just another one. These are two different use case scenarios. One is for the OIG is very unique ecosystem. They're very small. They're actually small agencies. They don't get the build off of HHS's infrastructure, right? They have to be separate and apart, but they're using commercial data centers to modernize their infrastructure. And Dave Catanoso, VA, man, it was just truly a pleasure to go to a VA hospital with you and just learn what you have to deal with on a daily basis. It's an incredible mission that you provide. And you're taking it from a whole different perspective. You like to move things to the cloud and leverage that. So we've got both dynamic environments here. And I'll hand it over to you, Jason. Thanks for doing this.
All right, my pleasure. And thank you, Tom. And of course, thanks to all the folks at GSA, the CIO Council, Alexis Masterson for inviting me to moderate. It's kind of fun. It's something a little different today for me to be invited by the government to moderate something. So I'm excited. I'm Jason Miller, Executive Editor of Federal News Network. When I moderate panels, I like to keep it very informal. I like to keep it very energetic. And I also like to get you thinking, because what I like about panels is the interaction. So I'm glad that we are able to take some questions from the audience. So I would definitely encourage those questions from the audience. We'll do our best to get to them. Before we get there and listen to Gerry and Dave talk a little bit, let me give you a little facts and figures to get your mind going. I know we're after lunch, maybe you're still kind of in that food coma, but a couple facts and figures. First fact, or first figure, I should say, is 255. Let me let that sink in for a second. That's the number of authorized cloud services in the FedRAMP marketplace as of this morning. Now that includes 22 CSPs that achieved FedRAMP High approval and 25 that offer all three types of what we call cloud services: infrastructure, platform, and software as a service. So again, 255 is that number. All right, let me give you another number. This one's a date, June 24th. How many of you know what June 24th is? It's coming up just around the corner. Well, that's the third anniversary of the Cloud Smart policy from OMB. Now, just to give you a sense of how much change over that short 3 years, I did a little bit of research, and spending on cloud services was around $6 billion in 2019. That's billion with a B. And that comes from Bloomberg Government. In 2022, BGov estimates that spending on cloud services should be about $9 billion across the government. So that's a pretty big increase in a short amount of time, just to give you a sense of where cloud is. All right, last figure of the day, 3. That is the number of errors that agencies have been in when it comes to cloud since 2010. Again, this comes from a white paper from Deloitte and BGov, and they outline each error this way. Error 1 was the problem-solving error, characterized by the launch of policy, technical, security documents that allowed government agencies to adopt the cloud. Error 2 was competing priorities error. This is where organizations had to decide when and what to move to the cloud. And then finally, what we're in now is many consider the third error, and this is the maximizing the mission error. And this is where we're, kind of looking at adopting cloud, scaling, figuring out how best to unlock the mission value of cloud. So 3 different cloud errors, and here we are in number 3. All right, that gives you a little bit of food for thought for tonight. You go home and have dinner with your family and friends. You can give them a little bit of facts and figures and get the conversation going. Okay, so here's how we're going to work my panel today. I'm not big on pre-planned questions. They bore me, to be honest. I don't do bios. I don't do background. If you don't know what VA does, look them up. If you want to know who Gerry Caron is, he's on LinkedIn. You can find him there. So I've asked each panelist to take about 3 to 5 minutes and tell you something you don't know, how they're taking advantage of cloud computing, how that focus has changed over the last decade, where they're at today, where they're going in the future. The whole goal is here to make sure you learn something and get value out of this. So we are unrehearsed, we are unplanned, and so here we go, out of the hat. Dave, I'm going to ask you to lead us off from VA's perspective. You have a ton of stuff going on. Tell us something we don't know about cloud.
So let me just give you a little background. I know you don't want to do background, but I think I need to set the stage a little bit given the sustainability conversation, right? So for those that don't know, the VA is the second largest federal agency. We've got about 500,000 employees and staff contractors, and we operate across the nation from Puerto Rico, all in the Philippines, 24/7. We've got 3 primary missions: healthcare, benefits, and memorials, plus all the corporate overhead and infrastructure to support that. Essentially operating one of the largest IT infrastructures literally on the planet to support that. And so there we have over 1,200 medical facilities. 140 of those are large medical centers. We've got over 50 veteran benefits offices and over 140 cemeteries. So as you can imagine, the executive order really impacts us across our entire agency, right? We've got from construction to staffing to personnel operations and of course IT. And as far as the cloud goes, we've been migrating to the cloud since 2018. We just hit our 200 application mark this week. We got 202 applications in our VA Enterprise Cloud this week. So that's a big milestone for us. We're also migrating more of our Vista Enterprise health record system, legacy system that we're moving over to Cerner, but we're migrating the current one up to the cloud to help that migration go smoother. So we've got a few of those migrating out of one of our data centers. And from a sustainability standpoint, we're actually doing some green projects at one of our data centers in Austin. We're integrating a cold chilled water loop using ice to chill the water, which is environmentally friendly. So we're definitely moving ahead in many fronts here, and cloud is a big part of our solution in the future.
All right, Dave, quick follow-up. I love the fact you broke the 200 application barrier. Of course, the question is, how many do you have left? That's always the what have you done for me lately, right?
Yeah, so we've got over 1,000 applications in our system inventory, the major applications and lots of minor applications. We've got lots of room to continue to go, but that's a big milestone for us. We're targeting 350 by the end of 2024, and we're well on target to meet that objective.
And then just real quick, we'll follow up because I think since we want to focus around on sustainability, the VA Enterprise Cloud, that is considered a commercial cloud, a hybrid cloud setup. Just give folks maybe a little bit of background how that works.
We consider a multi-hybrid cloud. We've got 2 cloud service providers, Amazon and Azure, that provide our VA Enterprise Cloud. Plus, we use a lot of other cloud service providers in the form of SaaS and other solutions where we need to. So, but the Enterprise Cloud is kind of the hub of that effort. And so we consider it a hybrid multi-cloud environment because it connects to our on-prem. We've got applications that run in either cloud, across both clouds, and also down to our on-prem environment and interconnecting with SaaS applications as well.
All right, well, thanks for that. A lot more to talk there. Let me bring in Gerry Caron from the HHS OIG office. Gerry, a lot of times when we get to hang out, we're talking about zero trust. So it's nice to talk to you about something else besides zero trust. Let's tell me something I don't know about HHS, OIG, and cloud.
Somehow I'll probably drift there though, Jason. Sorry if I do. But yeah, so HHS and cloud. So yeah, before I got here, I've been here for, it will be a year in May. Before I got here, we have down the hallway here from my office, I'm in the office today, we have basically the room that was called the career killer. And that was where our data center was, apparently. And I've seen pictures of it. Today, if you walked in, it's a break room. It's 2 nice industrial refrigerators and counter and microwave and everything. But to think that that was a data center at some point for the largest IG community in the federal government, it was pretty scary. So as Tom talked about, you know, there was a migration and we went out to a third-party commercial data center. Great advantages, and even in my past job was looking at these third-party data centers, and the thing that I liked about them is they were also the backbone for a lot of these cloud services. So residing side by side with some of the cloud services that we're consuming is a great on-ramp, as they are the backbone for them. So looking to take advantage for efficiency's sake from a network routing perspective for those types of things, but we are very much in the cloud as well. In our data centers, we are totally virtualized with all of our applications and all the services we provide on the data centers. But a lot of our migration now is focused on clouds being cloud smart. I won't say cloud first. It is cloud smart because you want to do what makes sense. We have all of our email, all of our files, and all of those reside in the cloud. Most of our applications that we're modernizing, we're either doing on a SaaS platform or in an IaaS PaaS platform. Just like David, we have those the 2 clouds that he mentioned. One we're using more than the other, but we are drawing up what I call a cloud ecosystem. So kind of scoping what cloud is for what reason, what are the decision-making process and the governance around that. And, you know, you talk about, and I don't think this is something that people don't know, but I think it's something that people are still starting to come realize is is how to manage and the governance of the cloud infrastructures. You know, it's like at the home. If you leave the water on, guess what? You're paying for every gallon of water that keeps going. So turn things off when you're not using them. So, you know, there's a management aspect of it. But you know, the great thing about the cloud is the flexibility it provides, right? I don't have to do all that logistics, back a truck up to the loading ramp, load all the hardware, go rack and stack it, run cables and everything. No, I can virtually spin something up in the cloud and off we go. But at the same time, it's making it awful easy. So you got to kind of have some kind of governance around that. Definitely. So going smart, going, you know, with a plan still. You know, it takes away a lot of the problems that we had with the physical type of management of a data center, but there's different things that you now have to manage in different ways. But you know, the thing is with the cloud, the flexibility, the features, and you know, you talk about zero trust, the things you can take advantage of for those reasons. You know, the cloud is a very enticing target and something that we definitely are looking at. But you know, we're trying to go forward with it in a smart way with what makes sense in what cloud. So we are a multi-cloud ecosystem and kind of drawing up the governance around that as we go along.
All right, a couple quick follow-ups there for you too, Gerry. And
Sure.
I saw we're getting a few questions coming in. So Dave, just be prepared for those questions because a couple of them were already pointed to you. You mentioned this cloud ecosystem, and maybe a lot of people hear cloud ecosystem and they're thinking, oh, you'll have 3, 4, 5 different platforms of some sort, or you'll have some sort of approach that, you know, how like a software factory approach or something. Can you maybe go a little detail about what you mean by cloud ecosystem? It sounds more like a process versus a thing.
Yeah, in a way it is. So, you know, we want to have definite interoperability, right? So for taking it from the user standpoint, you know, I don't want the users to have to care so much about what the platform is. The users want their stuff to work. So I want to make sure that there's data interoperability, that they have a seamless, as much as possible, seamless transition from one environment to another, that the environment works for them. As far as management, you know, we want to make sure that we have a good brokerage. Hey, I want to do this new thing. You know, all right, here's the criteria, ask the question, you know, do the 21 questions. All right, this is most suited for this. But also at the same time, you know, we have 2 IaaS platforms that we're using. I don't want to get locked into the other. Sometimes, you know, there's some advantages for going to the one. I want to have some interoperability. If one is not, I want to be able to move seamlessly, not have that vendor lock-in kind of aspect that people talk about as well. That's something that we want to still have to our advantage. So when I talk about that cloud ecosystem, both the interoperability, looking at from the customer aspect, as well as the management and governance aspect in the back end, and how we make decisions of what clouds we use for what, how data is going to be interoperable with them and data shared, how they're going to operate as part of our larger overall architecture. As far as the production aspect, of course, DevSecOps is something that we definitely want to do. You know, we have to rely a lot on humans, you know, to assess something before it goes from the dev to the production. We definitely want to make that pipeline as standard and automated as possible, with less human touch, but with higher efficiency and standardized checks of the security of things before they get to the production aspect. So we are looking at automating that DevSecOps pipeline, so we can take it, you know, what the cloud's advantage for. We want time to deployment, or time to value, basically. You know, I have an idea. From that time I have that idea till I can get it into the user's hands and make it, you know, a value to them. I want to increase that time to value, and I think that's something else the cloud gives us the advantage to do. And I get out of the infrastructure business. I did not do IT to be in the infrastructure business. I'm in IT to enhance the mission, not just manage rack and stack servers.
We used to talk a lot about those blinking lights and how, you know, will people miss the blinking lights, Gerry? I'm thinking,
and the whirring fans. Don't forget the fans.
The fans and the blinking lights. Dave, jump back in here because I want you to follow up maybe something also on what Gerry was saying about the user and the interoperability and the, you know, ensuring the customer sees value. Obviously, that's number one for VA, whether it's veterans or if you're looking internally to the work you're doing to ensure that VA employees are getting the best, be able to give the best services. How are you kind of bringing up that customer focused area through the cloud and the sustainability?
So as you can imagine, improving value and generating, innovating and providing better services to veterans and our staff, frontline staff that serve them is from the secretary on down is really our mission throughout our entire organization. And quite honestly, IT modernization is a big part of how we're doing it, not just with cloud, but we're also building a very aggressive edge capability throughout the large enterprise I described so that we can bring the computing where it needs to be, right size everything, and as part of that whole modernization effort. From an organizational standpoint, we're doing some of the similar things that Gerry mentioned. We're doing DevSecOps. That's a big part of what we're driving forward at the VA. We're also doing a product line management approach where we focus on products, delivering quality products to our customers, whether they're veterans or internal staff. So a lot of organizational adjustments while we also adjust the technology at the same time.
I want to talk maybe a little bit about that edge as well, because a lot of times when we talk about edge computing, we think of two things, right? You think of DoD, and they talk a lot about, tactical edge, getting information, data, technology of the warfighter. And then you think about maybe NOAA or National Weather Service or USDA or FDA and inspectors and other things. VA has that edge challenge too, even though you may be in a hospital. Telehealth was a perfect example of that. That showed just how much the edge you all are at.
Yeah, so with VA's got a similar mission. We're spread out all over the country. Like I said, Puerto Rico to the Philippines, more than just CONUS, right? And so not only are we trying to bring edge capabilities into our medical centers or into our smaller, clinics or benefits offices and things like that, but we're literally looking at bringing it to the veterans' home at some point with Internet of Things, and we've already done it with telehealth. So a lot of these things are at their beginning stages, and we're still working out with our partners at VHA and VBA and other in the Cemetery Administration. But certainly it's something we're looking at because it's all about delivering better capability to our customers ultimately. So.
All right, we got just a couple questions from someone in the audience. So let me just throw them out to you, Dave. This was specifically for you, and the questions kind of build on each other. So I'm going to read through them all. I'm not sure you need to answer them all because I think you've answered some of them already. Okay. Is VA open to multi-cloud? I think the answer is yes. You already are in multi-cloud. So I got that one for you. But the other one was any considerations about the joint warfighter computing capability? Very similar. Is that something VA is starting to consider? Are you looking at it? Are you following it? Any insights?
We're definitely tracking it. We work closely with our partners in DoD. We meet with them pretty regularly, so we're aware of what they're doing. We're also pretty confident in our own acquisition strategy and approach to delivering cloud service has been very effective for us. So we're definitely tracking and sharing lessons learned and information, no doubt.
All right. And then finally, he talks about the VA, I guess, enterprise cloud. So far, there's 2 providers. Is there anything you can tell us about what you're thinking about other providers or expanding?
Well, at this point in time, we're not really discussing that. We're in the middle of looking at some of our contracts right now, but certainly we're a multi-cloud agency already. So it's not something that we're that concerned about. We already are very, very multi-cloud. So,
all right, very good. Thank you for that. It's always good to get those questions from the audience. It keeps us on our toes a little bit. Gerry, let me talk to you a little bit about this idea. Multi-clouds is a big issue. You hit upon it on your own when you talked about the need to ensure that you don't get lock-in and you can have interoperability. The other piece to this is around when you talk about modernization is do you have the right, if you will, application in the right cloud? Are you meeting specific project or programmatic goals? And if one cloud is better than the other for certain things, how are you making that decision? How are you judging this application goes in this cloud?
Yeah, it's definitely an art form that's continuing to be developed. Some of the things that we are trying to do better first is, understand we don't want to do lift and shift. The modernization of some of these applications that we might have on-prem, for example, these are opportunities. And we have to let our customers know that, yes, we understand your business needs and you do it this way, but here's the opportunity. You've probably been doing it this way because why? That's the way this thing that you're using works. Here's your opportunity. How do you want it to work? So getting their processes and their understanding. So once we understand, it's like, okay, here's how they really want to work through this process or this mission need and things like that. Then we look at what's in our inventory and what makes sense. Do we have to create something in IaaS? Do we have something already where we have a SaaS platform that's no code, low code? Where we can build processes that, and workflows and forms and things like that. It might work for there. So there's definitely an assessment, but it's definitely starts with the customer for us, understanding not how they work, but how they want to work. and not just doing this lift and shift. Once we identify that feedback, we have a governance board as well, understanding, the prioritization of projects and things like that. We also have to assess the cost of doing things, what type of expertise we have or will we need. So there's a lot of factors we have to look in when we make these decisions. But sometimes it's a as you go kind of thing, and we learn from it and we get better at it, and we learn from it and we get better at it. We iterate because we can't modernize everything all at once. We don't have those kind of resources. So, lessons learned from the last time, lessons learned to the next time. So we keep building it and improving it and maturing it as we go, I think.
David, the quick follow-up, it was a very similar question. You mentioned, for instance, the electronic health record Vista, moving it to the cloud. So when you do transition to Cerner, life gets maybe a little bit easier. How do you decide which goes where? And as you're looking at those applications, those 200 applications and 800 more, some will stay in the data center and some will be modernized that way. How do you go through that process?
So I'm going to agree with Gerry. It's more of an art than a science. We realized very quickly that we had to have an agnostic process so we developed our own internal process for evaluating apps and moving them. And there's a lot of factors that we consider, in terms of what other systems the application needs to talk to, what else may have migrated already, the skill set of the team, some of the specific features of the CSP, and so on, right? So it's more of what's the best way to accomplish the mission is how we drive each decision. But definitely we're looking at it, and you're absolutely right. Some of the applications are going to stay on-prem, or they're going to be in some kind of hybrid configuration going forward, because that's the best way to deliver the functionality. And we like to think that even when it was cloud first, we were doing it very smartly. So cloud smart was really just an affirmation of what we were already doing. And we continue to do that, I think, at the VA.
I do remember the time when every cloud was all about saving money and more flexibility and agility, and folks kind of took that half a step back and realized there's more to it than that, and they had to get a little smarter about it. Do you all think, looking at the, we got a question just came in, but real quick, do you get a sense that the maturity that we've seen when it comes to what goes in the cloud, what doesn't, what makes sense, those processes have really kind of been influenced by the past in many ways? I mean, I know it's kind of an obvious question, but Gerry's shaking his head, so jump in.
Yeah. So, always people used to say, the cost savings, there's cost savings, Well, in the federal government, we don't save costs, we avoid cost. There's cost avoidance maybe, but sometimes you have to invest to save or invest to have that cost avoidance. So I think there's still lessons to be learned around the cost, right? You plan as best you can. There's different structures and things, there's storage costs, there's CPU costs as you spin something up, there's extract, as you take data out of the cloud, there's that cost for that, and so it's really understanding that billing. And we do 2-year budget cycles, and we try to plan 2 years ahead. It's kind of difficult sometimes because there's not a lot of flexibility when we see the bill after the water spigot's been on for so long. It's like, oh man, how are we gonna, now we got to figure out how to pay for this, might not be able to do something else. So it's definitely as we understand, is building that better planning and understanding. But the other thing about the cloud is you're not always having to keep the blinky lights and the fans whirring all the time, right? You can spin down services. If you're not doing them, just spin them up as on demand, as needed, and then turn them off when they're not needed. Kind of do that on demand aspect. Then you're not, as long as it's off. It's like your car nowadays. You come to the red light, what happens? Your car shuts off. And then when you take your foot off the brake, what happens? Your car starts, because it's supposed to be saving gas. Same thing, with the cloud. You're not using it, spin it down. Understand your storage as best as possible, and try to estimate that, figure out, what the extraction is. We're learning better to how to plan around this and understand. And I think now we're starting to see is like, all right, how can I save? Like, we just went through a whole exercise of understanding cost in one of our clouds. And it's like, hey, well, if we took these type of actions and took this kind of discipline with this, then we can better manage our cost. But it's been one of those things. It's kind of like it's been trial and error in some instances, and then it's like, all right, now we got to back up. Now we understand better how to plan, what's making up these costs and everything. So I definitely just like planning for what goes in what cloud. managing costs has kind of been the same. And, we're starting to get that art form down so we can plan better. But like I said, being in a 2-year planning budget cycle is kind of tough in the federal government, because like we're doing 2024 right now. You really think what I say I'm going to do in 2024 today is what I'm going to actually do in 2024 per letter? No, it's probably going to change a little bit different between now and then. But we're a non-for-profit, and so we gotta manage the budget. And so, the better we can understand and start planning and taking advantage of the services these clouds do to save money, the better off we are.
That's part of one of the questions we received from the audience is, and this is someone writes, I've seen many recent reports that many enterprises think about 30% of their cloud spend is wasted. And that they're asking, how do you think, what percentage of your spend is wasted? How do you plan to reduce that? Do we even know? I mean, that seems kind of like that old, the O&M versus DME. What's O&M? What's DME? They come so much together that it's hard to determine. David, do you want to jump in on that a little bit?
I would certainly would agree with that percentage at VA, but I knew obviously you can always optimize your spend in the cloud, as Gerry was just saying. And we realized we've been doing a lot of lessons learned, and we realized fairly early in the process we need to do it more in an ad hoc way. So we stood up what we call a health assessment process within our cloud environment, where we periodically review each project for health assessment to check on, are they doing FinOps to make sure they're spending correctly? We tune down the use of storage, snapshots, turning on and off services, tuning, right sizing services. There's a lot of techniques you can use using some of the CSP techniques like savings plans and reservations that we can use to cut costs. So there's a lot of things we do with it just from the financial side. Then we also work with the apps to look at whether we can help them mature in any way, maybe move some more cloud native services or containerize their apps. So their VA Platform 1 that we're standing up to put an orchestration platform in for containers across our cloud. And so we're doing a lot of things to mature and learn from previous migrations. So over 200 migrations, we learn a lot of things and always try to recycle that information to benefit for the next migration.
I think that's a really important point to hit upon here. And let me just kind of drill into that a little bit. It's not just you go to the cloud, you leave it, right? It's different than what we heard earlier from, for instance, when Von Noga from EPA was talking about data centers. You always worried about the time you needed the most, and then you built that. So if you thought, well, the most we'll ever need is 1,000 servers, you bought 1,000 servers. With cloud, you always have that piece where, well, we need 10 now, but we can always upgrade 10 more, 10 more, 10 more, but then we can always bring it back down. So that's why cloud gives you that constant view, where data centers maybe at one point, didn't always have that challenge. I don't know, David, I think it just occurs to me, what's the big lesson maybe you learned from that first 200? Anything that you could point to?
Well, I think you just hit on it. It's constant improvement, right? You don't just move it and then leave it, right? You move it and tune it. And sometimes you can tune it almost immediately because you learn something the day you turn it on in the cloud after you migrate it. Like we just had a recent migration where we realized one of the settings was undersized from our estimate. And we learned that the first day it went live. And within a matter of hours, we were able to tune it on the fly and get it corrected. By the next day, we were running with expected results. And so if we had to do that in another environment, we might still be waiting for the parts to arrive, right? Or maybe to get the acquisition place to order the parts, right? So it could have been weeks or months to do the same thing we were able to do in a matter of hours. So it's really about that constant tuning and modernizing and maturing what you're doing with automation and new levels of service. Like I said, containerization, serverless, cloud native techniques, just constantly maturing, modernizing, and improving.
Let me tag this back around to the beginning of the entire conversation when we talked about cloud and sustainability and data centers. As you move forward, are you taking some of those lessons learned from the cloud and can you apply some of that to the data centers? People talked about containerization in the chat. David, you talked about containerization as well. Are you able to kind of pull in some of those learnings and move them into the data center to improve the optimization, sustainability? Either one of you?
Sure. So our containerization platform, VA Platform 1, actually runs in our data centers and in our cloud environments. It spans all three. So we have the ability to move containers back and forth if the application needs that to happen, right? So that's part of our strategy is to optimize and modernize our data centers as well, converged infrastructures and virtualization and basically tie them in to create that very complementary edge computing capability that ties into our enterprise cloud.
And Gerry, do you want to jump in on here too? We got about a minute left.
Well, you know, I'm not going to go without saying anything about zero trust. You know, it's about your data. And you asked at the beginning, what is something, you know, unique or, you know, that people should know or something? It's your data. Wherever it is, whatever cloud it is, you're responsible. It's your data. You're the data owner. You can't trust that, you know, the vendor is going to monitor your data. They're monitoring the tenant or the platform that which you're in from that level, that enterprise type level, but you're responsible for your data and the monitoring of that data. It can be FedRamped, but you know, if it's a SaaS and you're responsible for 5% of that configuration, you better do your 5%. Otherwise, I don't care if it's FedRamped. But when you talk about, you know, so from that aspect, yeah, it's like, how do we containerize data? Where does data reside? Where is it flowing? Whether it be from on-prem, I want to treat it as the same as possible. I don't want to, you know, try to do different, you know, methods here and methods there. You know, I want to take advantage. The cloud, I think, has a lot of great advantages, which makes it a little more enticing than trying to do a bunch of stuff on-prem. But, you know, fair warning is, you know, it's a little easier to ramp things up. So you got to kind of have that oversight because you can get a little out there too quick if you're not kind of controlling it. But as far as your question, it's like, you know, going back to the data, it's like understanding where your data is and using, just like, you know, David's talking about, you know, that containerization, doing it on-prem. If you're doing it in the cloud, you know, it's a good practice to do on-prem too. So, you know, try not to make things overcomplicated. Keep it simple.
Famous last words. That's how we're going to end, Tom. Don't make things overcomplicated. Keep it simple. Gerry, David, thank you so much. You all did a great job. You made my job easy. And thanks to the folks in the audience too for your questions. Tom, I turn it back to you.
Thanks. And Dave, that's why we love you, because you didn't set it and forget it. When you move to the cloud, you're always monitoring that environment. Gerry, I can't wait to work with you at ATARC on the Zero Trust Working Group that you lead. It's a fantastic thing that ATARC's put together over there, because we're all learning together, and we've got to expand that to the state and locals and help our partners in that regard.